her.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Great. Okay. Well, welcome everybody to Reboot and Providing Care. Now, let me just begin by saying we are not going to run over today. I promise you, we are not going to run over. And in fact, I am going to make every effort to quit early. So, good news. So, Reboot and Providing Care is a program developed by SRT Inc. and members of the Oklahoma Medical Reserve Corps Stress Response Team. And it's funded by a recent grant from the National Association of City County Health Organizations. The authors of this program are myself and Misty Ann Job, who is a longstanding member, volunteer with the Stress Response Team, Oklahoma Medical Reserve Corps. And it's one of the things that we have available to our members is that our volunteers is that they can get involved in writing grants and in developing programs. And Misty is one of those individuals. The presenters are myself and Jessica Rose Johnson, who is also a volunteer with the Oklahoma Medical Reserve Corps. Just briefly, for those of you who don't know me, my name is John Call. I'm a forensic psychologist, an attorney, as well as trained as a disaster emergency medical technician, and have been involved with the Oklahoma Medical Reserve Corps since 2005. So, Jessica, introduce yourself.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessica Rose Johnson. I am a Marine Corps veteran and a Navy spouse. I've worked in suicide prevention for over 6 years now, and I'm happy to be here and be able to share some of our training with you, and I hope it makes an impact on your life.
Thanks. So we have to have some continuing education disclaimers. In compliance with continuing education requirements, our planners, our presenters, and their spouses, partners wish to disclose that they have no financial interests or other relationships with the manufacturers of commercial products, suppliers of commercial services, or commercial supporters. Planners have reviewed content to ensure that there is no bias. The presentation will not include any discussion of unlabeled use of a product or a product under investigational use. The Oklahoma Medical Reserve Corps and Stress Response Team did not accept commercial support for this continuing educational activity. And this professional development activity has been jointly provided collaboratively with the Oklahoma Medical Reserve Corps and the OU College of Nursing. Oops, even more disclosures. Is this because I'm a lawyer? I don't know. Notice of requirements for successful completion of continuing education credit. Complete the evaluation, which will be provided by a link, I believe, at the end. And when you turn in the evaluation and post-test, which we will be going over together at the end, you'll receive a certificate of successful completion. If you have any questions about that, don't call me, call Teresa Murphy. That's why she gets paid the big bucks. Okay, remain on mute while we go through the program. And we're going to conduct a Q&A at the end of each section and at the end of the program as well. So you open the chat at the bottom of your screen, and you can type your questions anytime in the box that opens, and you click enter to submit your question. And Teresa will be monitoring, and Jessica Rose will be monitoring the questions and bringing them up at the end of each section and at the end of training. We're going to have a little bit of discussion between Jessica Rose and I, kind of like a podcast discussion. Also, we're having some poll questions, just a couple of poll questions that will pop up during the presentation. We'll let you know. Just go ahead and answer those poll questions, and we will discuss the results from that as well. So SRT Inc. is a Oklahoma nonprofit 501c3 corporation, and it's the organization that obtains the funding and houses the Oklahoma Medical Reserve Corps Stress Response Team. You know, one of the things about the stress response team, particularly as it relates to COVID pods, points of dispensing, our volunteers, and there's approximately 400 volunteers statewide, when they deploy to a pod, they don't deploy as a part of the stress response team. They deploy as a part of the unit of the county in which they reside. And that's the organizational aspect of how we work in Oklahoma. And we have had several of the individuals that were mentioned this morning by the different district unit coordinators were actually members of the SRT. Dr. Fritz out of Tulsa being one. So our flagship unit is the stress response team, and it's been a federally recognized Medical Reserve Corps unit since 2009. And it's made up of licensed mental health and healthcare professionals and others interested in volunteering to provide behavioral and emotional support to disaster survivors. So the purpose of our program today is to provide all volunteers with the tools and mechanisms to cope with the effects and after effects of emotional stress, physical stress, and trauma experienced due to the pandemic, and to help us all reboot and ready ourselves for our future deployments. SRT Inc. received a $10,000 operational readiness grant from NACHO this year. And this grant is to be used to fund a comprehensive social media campaign, but also to design and implement a specialized behavioral health program for Medical Reserve Corps volunteers in Oklahoma, but not just for Oklahoma. I've already been contacted by our regional director, who has requested early publication of this program so she can distribute it to regional directors nationwide. This program aims to provide all volunteers with the tools and mechanisms to cope with the effects and after effects of emotional stress, physical stress from this pandemic. So what is Reboot and Providing Care And why should we talk about it? Well, it's because of the pandemic. You know, the pandemic is one of the most stressful calamities that can happen to the world. Why? Because it's a prolonged centripetal disaster with no clear-cut physical or chronological boundary. The whole world has been and continues to be traumatized. Stress trauma can lead to poor health and even injury. All of us need to work to manage this trauma consciously. CARE, and it's purposely misspelled with two ways, and I'll explain why in a minute, is a specially designed self-help tool developed to help us all achieve this goal. For those of you who have attended Tom Thompson's and Lauren Stein's and my psychological first aid, you know we've talked about the different types of disaster. You have human-made disaster versus natural disaster. What type of disaster is a pandemic? It could be either one. A pandemic can be human-made or natural. Is it an immediate disaster or a prolonged disaster? Immediate disaster is like a tornado. Hits, it's gone. No, it's a prolonged disaster. It's been going on since December of 2019, and we don't know when it's going to end. Is it a centrifugal disaster or a centripetal disaster? Well, actually, take, for example, a bombing like the Oklahoma City Murrah building bomb. That's a centripetal disaster in the sense that it happens, and those of us who survive, we have to be reminded of it as we go in and out of Oklahoma City. A centrifugal disaster is like, let's say, a train wreck outside of Dodge City, Kansas. The survivors go home, and they don't have to return and have that reminder. Pandemic doesn't have a location. It's everywhere. In a traditional disaster, you'll see this heroic face. I mean, there's a bombing or a tornado and more, and you'll have people rush to get the survivors. That's that heroic phase. And there's the honeymoon phase as the days and weeks go by, those few weeks. Most recently, in Miami, when they had that condominium collapse. And then there's this disillusionment, this depression phase, with hopefully a gradually recovery. But a pandemic's different. Given that it is a prolonged centripetal disaster that is chronologically and physically everywhere, I think that we don't, this heroic phase of, hey, we can take care of it right now, and it's going to be a while. It's going to be more than a while. And so what we have to be aware of and what we have to be concerned about in a prolonged disaster is a long-term disillusionment and a long-term problem of achieving recovery. So that means stress. What exactly is stress? Well, we've all heard that. In fact, the matter is, our unit's called the stress response team. Stress, by definition, is the inability to cope with a threat, real or imagined. Stress can lead to poor health and injury. Unlike stress, challenge is an important ingredient for healthy and productive work. Challenge is that excitement and edginess that we have maybe when we are going into a sport, let's say. That adrenaline rush that we get right before we take off on that race. Often confused, challenge energizes people psychologically and physically. It can motivate people to learn new skills and master their jobs. When a challenge is met, we feel good, but it's not so with stress. So what's your resilience rating? Because the ability to withstand stress is the concept of how resilient we are. Now, as we are going to be talking about different apps, these apps are free. And one of the first ones that I want to mention is the Provider Resilience app. You can find it in your app store for Android or iOS. And it has 4 questionnaires: the vacation clock, the burnout questionnaire, the builders killers questionnaire, and the pro-qual questionnaire, which stands for professional quality of life. You fill that out. Doesn't take very long. And you'll get a resilience rating. And when you do that this afternoon, when you download that app, ask yourself, hey, what's that resilience rating for me? Is it edging towards low resilience, or is it in the good range? So in order to make stress management a priority, it's important to understand the process of how people change. When changing behaviors like those associated with reducing stress, most people go through a cycle known as the stages of change. One way to think about it is there's 5 stages of change. I mean, stage 1 is the person who says, hey, I'm not interested in this. I'm not interested in dealing with my stress right now. I don't think I have that much stress, or I just don't want to deal with it. I'm sure those people didn't even attend this program. Stage 2 is a person maybe who's saying, I'm considering it. Stage 3 is, hey, I want to do something. Stage 4 is, I've begun to do something. Then stage 5 is the person who says, hey, I've been doing it and I'm coping right now. So what stage are you in? Okay, determining what stage you are in is an important first step. And we have this poll question. Go ahead and fill it out. Let's find out what you guys think about what stage you're in. Oh, people are already punching away. That's cool. Let's keep that up for a while till we get what people who looks like it's people are completed it. Most of the people. And we'll talk about this, Jessica, in a minute. So what's CARRE? CARRE is a self-administered process connected to a menu of skills and techniques designed to increase a person's self-efficacy for maintaining emotional and behavioral resilience and connection to family, friends, and community. I love big words. That's why I write these big words. I love big words. CARE stands for Community Assessment, Alignment, Resilience, and Empathy. These are the overarching goals of the program and for the individual utilizing the program. The person first assesses their needs. And based upon their needs, they determine which tools to employ to seek alignment, thereby strengthening their resilience, recharging their empathy. And that's what volunteers in the Medical Reserve Corps need. They need resilience, but they need empathy. And ultimately, therefore, helping them reconnect with their community to deploy once again.
So I think we don't have any more participants on the poll. So do you want me to go ahead and show the results?
Yeah. Do you want to lead off on that, or?
Is it showing now?
Yeah, I see it on my screen. So it looks like that there's a couple of people who are in stage 1 who feel, hey, I really don't need to deal with this. I guess maybe they need just the CEUs today. Or I guess theoretically, they could be in complete denial. As an old professor said, denial is just not a river in Egypt. I don't know. But there's a bunch of people who are considering stage 3 and stage 4 that maybe they need to get into it and do something about it. And there's a bunch of people who feel like, hey, they really are and have been practicing self-care techniques. Okay. Interesting. So, CARE, it's an empirically derived skill set. 6 core actions, each standalone. You build skills with self-monitored tasks. And it's a flexible, tailored approach. What are the goals of CARE? Well, it helps accelerate recovery if needed. It strengthens our emotional resilience, and it strengthens and nourishes our ability to be empathic. Secondarily, it helps prevent mental health problems. It supports role functioning, and it's a flexible self-delivery. This is a self-administered program to help one become self-efficacious. Okay. CARE is comprised of 6 empirically derived skills. These are the 6 core actions. And here they are. Personal assessment, which is obtaining important information about needs and concerns. And that's the first step. It might be the last step, depending upon circumstances. But you always have to do a personal assessment, in a sense, to take your own psychological temperature. And then there are 5 other core actions: handling emotions, resolving problems, which is increasing self-mastery in the ability to reduce current stresses and problems, confidence building, activity planning, helping to arrange activities and behaviors which give us a sense of accomplishment, making connections. These are the 6 components or core actions of CARE. And so this is what it looks like. Personal assessment. There's always personal assessment. And then depending upon the circumstances from the personal assessment, 1 or more of the other 5 core actions are utilized. Now, the CARE program recommends using job sheets or worksheets, and we'll be showing those. There are also smartphone applications to aid you in utilizing this self-administered and self-monitored process. These tools have been selected from those recommended by the Military Health System or the National Center for PTSD, and they're free. And the following is the list of those endorsed applications. Life Armor, Jackpot, Provider Resilience, the T2 Mood Tracker, Tactical Breather Virtual Hope Box, Mindfulness Coach, COVID Coach, and the PTSD Coach. And we'll be talking a little bit more about these tools, and we'll be showing you which tools are probably the most relevant to which core action. Now, to help you get a handle on this program, we've written a CARRE booklet, which is free to download. It's a PDF file, and you could put it into Apple Books or Kindle Books or a PDF reader and keep it on your phone. And to access it, you can copy this link and download it from Dropbox. Likewise, if you're having difficulty with that, you can go to SRTINC.com. That's our website, to the blog page. And the most recent blog has this link as well. Again, that is www.oksrtinc.com. Okay, let's begin with component 1, personal assessment. This is something that even if you feel that you are at stage 1 or at stage 5, that on a regular basis, you should probably do this. You should take your psychological temperature. So the goals of personal assessment is to gather information to understand our most pressing concerns and then to prioritize and plan the appropriate care intervention. Remember that when deciding what problem to focus on, it's helpful to consider 1, a significant problem. 2, one that's causing severe distress. 3, a problem that needs to be addressed sooner than others. 4, a problem that is worsening over time. And 5, addressing that problem will reduce others. So problem areas that you should think about and are covered by the CARE screening form are these areas: physical health, mental health, emotional distress, role functioning, etc. So step 2 is to summarize and prioritize your concerns. And as I said a moment ago, this little checklist helps you to focus which problems you should prioritize. Step 3 is to make an action plan. And this is where we have 2 job sheets: the CARE screening form and the CARE skills selection chart. This is the CARE screening form. You have a problem area, let's say physical health. Am I worried about my physical health? Yes or no? If it's yes, then you describe the problem to the side. Then you go to the CARE skills selection chart. So let's say that a person has gone through the CARE screening form, and they have decided that they have there's a problem with feeling depressed, sad, and alone. So this skill selection chart suggests that one could use one or more of these 3 core actions to help deal with that issue: handling emotions, activity planning, or making connections. Now, what personal assessment apps should you consider using or to help you with personal assessment? Here's 3 that I feel, and Jessica Rose feels, that we feel are most helpful in this personal assessment. And I would really point to the provider resilience one as a really having some excellent personal assessment sections. Life Armor has self-assessments to help measure and track symptoms. And then T2 Mood Tracker also helps identify trends and triggers. So let's think of some case vignette. Jessica, there you are. So what kind of a case vignette could we come up with?
I think one that we see pretty often is mothers, especially mothers who are maybe retired, their kids are already graduated, spending time volunteering. So they have the emptiness in their home. They might be extra affected during this time emotionally, not being as connected to their children if their children are grown and moved away. And if they're retired, maybe not having those connections to coworkers or a job, and with volunteering, maybe being down due to the restrictions because of the pandemic.
So maybe feeling down, depressed, alone.
Definitely. Isolated, not very connected.
Mm-hmm. And going back, we would take a look at, oh, there we go. I don't know how to connect to people anymore. I don't have enough people that I can count on, for example. So maybe making connections, activity planning, confidence building might be some tools, or I should say core actions that they could utilize if they're feeling, like I said, feeling depressed, sad, and alone. Maybe handling emotions, activity planning. You know, another kind of volunteer is the guy. Let's say a man who is, maybe he's divorced, late middle age. And, oftentimes men handle the depression by being angry and maybe drinking too much beer in the evening. So we could have a volunteer, I could imagine, who is a man, divorced, late middle aged. He's got a job. He does volunteer work, goes to pods, but he's drinking more. So he feels, he's just, maybe he's doing 1 to 2 6-packs a night. So does that personal assessment, and he's, that maybe I'm using too much alcohol, and maybe he's concerned about anger issues. Maybe, what are some core action skills that he could use, do you think, Jessica?
I think definitely handling emotions, maybe confidence building, even being able to connect to people. So making connections, handling emotions, and confidence building.
Do we have any questions or comments coming through the chat at all? I can't really tell because I'm all blocked up by these.
None yet. I'm sure
Okay.
there will be some though.
Very good. Okay, we are on time, ladies and gentlemen. Component 2, handling emotions. Jessica.
Yes, it is not giving me the option. Thank you. Perfect. So our rationale for handling emotions is because we have these distressing reactions and they can negatively affect us in many ways, right? They can affect our mood, our ability to make decisions, our relationships, just our daily function and our general well-being. Learning skills to manage these reactions can protect us overall, our health. It can improve our confidence. It can enhance our relationships, and it can really help put efforts, positive efforts towards coping. So our goals for this section of handling emotions is we want to enhance a skill to calm us when we're having these physically and emotionally upsetting reactions to situations. We want to be able to learn new strategies to deal with these reactions in stressful situations. And we most importantly want to put words to these difficult experiences so we can better understand them, and that way we can better manage them in the future when they come up. So we have 3 main steps for handling emotions. 1, identifying those distressing reactions and their triggers. 2, learning the skills to address priority reactions. And 3, creating a plan to manage those reactions. So in step 1, where we're identifying the distressing emotions and triggers, that's the biggest key part, right? Is identifying it, recognizing it, and naming it. So if we can identify these type of reactions that we're experiencing, maybe it's in the moment we can identify it, or we can look back and think, man, last week, this was my reaction to this, and I was so upset about this. Right? Maybe you don't know why, but at least identifying it and naming it. And next, when we identify how distressing it is, doing that pain scale, right? Just like we have the physical pain scale, we have that emotional pain scale. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how distressing was that event? How distressing was that emotion? Then we describe how we've tried to manage our reactions in the past, because I'm sure there's many of ways we've tried to handle situations that haven't quite worked out in the end. So if that didn't work out, then what are some ways that we could change our reactions to make them successful in the future? And step 2, as we learn skills to address these emotions, right? So the goal of learning the skills is to really give us strategies where we can master our reactions, because triggers are going to come. Stressful situations are going to come. There may be memories tied to this stress. So we want to be able to learn skills where we can manage this. And these approaches have been shown to help adjustments after stressful experiences. So once we experience something, maybe we can learn and develop those skills. So then after the stressful experience, we can deal with it better the next time. And we're also developing a toolkit of strategies so we can learn and use different types of contexts that could benefit us in the future. So the skill categories of handling emotions, we have the calming skills, right? So breathing, that's a big key in anything we do, is our breath. Our self-talk, how do we talk to ourselves? Are we pumping ourselves up, or is it negative self-talk that's coming in? Meditation, which a lot of the apps that we've mentioned have some guided medication and breathing. Another one is skills to put thoughts and feelings into words. So writing exercises like journaling, writing our thoughts out and really trying to work them out. Then you have skills to recognize and manage those triggers, like identifying the reminders, the ways that we cope with them before, ways that we've used to cope with them during, and things that we've done to help after an event has occurred. And then we have skills to develop a personalized strategy. So for our calming skills, we're breathing, right? When we're anxious, we tend to breathe faster, shallower, it's harder. We're getting worked up. And it seems the more and more and more you get worked up, the harder and harder and harder it is to calm down. So really trying to focus in on our breathing. And the way we can breathe can be extremely important to calm ourselves down and keep ourselves calm, especially when we have such strong physical reactions and those emotions cause our breathing to peak. We really want to prevent those from getting worse. So staying calm in the moment. One great app is the Mindfulness Coach. It is one of my favorites. There's a lot of audio mindfulness. There's a body scan to just sit and kind of scan over your whole body. How is your whole body feeling? There's also some other great recordings like mindful eating. Sometimes we eat really fast through our food just because we got to get through the day. So taking some time and really enjoying something like a peppermint or a piece of gum, those kind of things. So again, like Dr. Call mentioned earlier, these apps are free. I hope that you take some time to download some that sound interesting and play around with them. But the Mindfulness Coach is definitely going to help you with those breathing exercises. So skills to put those thoughts and feelings into words, right? There's a lot of evidence in how useful journaling can be and really writing things out, because sometimes we have thoughts or feelings that we don't want to express or talk with someone in person. Maybe we're embarrassed, maybe we feel shamed. So that's one way to try and write them out and get them out of our heads onto paper and work through them. It can really help with things like intrusive memories and nightmares, flashbacks, that overwhelming concern about things after you've experienced something. Maybe it's something you're experiencing now and having that constant concern, or something you're afraid that will happen in the future. So one thing, once you start with journaling, just start writing about whatever it is, right? Whatever it is that has you overwhelmed, anxious, upset, just write it down, right? And try and include the details of your feelings. So writing down that, this happened, it made me feel angry, my heart was racing, kind of all the details to really analyze how your mind and body reacted to a situation. And the goal would be is to keep writing for 30 minutes. So you have a really good amount of time to process what has happened, try and keep it uninterrupted, right? So it's just you writing all this down, getting everything out. And if you don't feel comfortable with writing, speak into a voice recorder. That's one thing that I personally love to do. I use the voice memos on my phone. So when I'm worked up, I yell into my phone and I talk things out with myself, usually in my car. Other options are drawing a picture, creating some type of art, using that creative brain that you have, or maybe turning those words into a song or into a poem, just getting it out there. So step 3 is to create a plan to manage the reaction, right? So now that we've named it, now that we're writing out what it feels like, those emotions tied to it, what are we going to do with it? So after learning and practicing some skills to manage the distressing events, you want to make a plan so every day you can get better at managing those stressful events. So remember the importance of trying the skill at least a week. So you really want to build up that skill and work on it for a week to really retain it, to use it when a stressful event occurs. Here is an example of the Handling Emotions job sheet. The link is in the chat. I believe the lovely Miss Teresa shared that, so you can access the link with our documents. And this is kind of what we've talked about already today, right? Describing the event on a scale of 1 to 5. How overwhelming was this event? What are things that you could do that can make you feel better in this event in the future? And what are some plans that you want to do to address this upsetting situation and emotions going forward? So the apps, love the apps, love the free stuff. Life Armor is amazing. It has a password protection, and there's a lot of really good reading. So if you want to read more about different things like sleep, depression, PTS, those type of things, you can go on that app, and there's a lot of articles you can read. PTSD Coach, you can manage your symptoms on there. There's activity trackers, just kind of a general check-in how you're doing. And then the Provider Resilience, which is also passcode and security question protected. There's additional benefits in there like stretching and that audio meditation. I love that. And quizzes to check in on yourself. the Teasing mood tracker. So you can track all the things like anxiety, depression. And what's really cool about that is you can see a graph. It'll map out the graph for you the more you track your emotions and the events you've gone through. The tactical breather, that audio breather, really trying to get yourself take those deep breaths in, deep breaths out. And the virtual hope box, it's also password protected. Most of these are. There's quick little games to distract you when you get really worked up, if you just need something quick to distract you. There's also audio meditation, and there's quotes. So maybe you just need a quote to inspire you to get you through the day. That's another great option. Mindfulness Coach. Mindfulness Coach has tons of different options. I already spoke on it before for audio mindfulness. Definitely check it out. One of my favorites. And COVID Coach is becoming one of my favorites because it's almost an all-inclusive app. It has a little bit of everything in there: managing stress, check your mood, finding resources. There's timers on there. And again, that audio breathing.
So let's think of some. Let's think of Betty and Frank. Betty, the older woman who was retired, living alone, empty nest. Frank, maybe drinking too much beer. Betty would certainly benefit from, I guess both of them would benefit from handling emotions.
I definitely think when we have severe reactions, like bodily reactions that we don't even think of. I have a friend that anytime that she gets angry, she cries. So having to control that crying. And of course, then she's embarrassed, she's crying. So she gets worked up more and more and more. So she's crying heavier. And there's a friend of mine, or like Frank, right, who gets very angry when he gets worked up. So being able to find out what our triggers are, that maybe Betty is getting upset because she misses her kids. So she is becoming overly emotional, but more on the side of crying when she's getting upset. Well, Frank, on the other hand, might be getting more worked up and angry and lashing out for his emotions. So kind of figuring out where our emotions come from and why we're reacting. I like to say, hangry, everybody can relate to hangry, right? But we don't think of that when it comes to other emotions. Right? Oh, you're hungry. That's why you're acting angry. Well, what about you're stressed out? That's why you're acting angry.
I have found in my years of professional experience that, working with professional men, particularly men in law enforcement, I was the psychologist for Oklahoma City Police Department for 20 plus years, as well as did evaluations for the Oklahoma Bureau of Investigation and other police departments in Oklahoma, that there was this huge resistance to even admitting that there was an issue that they were having difficulty coping with. I remember, and I want you to think about, Jessica, because I want to talk about this, but I want to tell this one story about my family. My middle sister, the one of her many husbands that I really liked, was a fireman. And I remember him talking to me early on in our relationship. He was a fire captain in Wichita, Kansas. And he had a big gulp cup. And this big gulp cup was filled with, I would say, a pint of Crown Royal and the rest of it Coke. And he said, Doc, this psychology stuff is all a bunch of BS. You know how we handle it in the fire department? Well, when we get our first crispy critter, we make that young noob go out and buy a case of beer or more and bring it to the station, and we all drink it. Well, you see, that was a common thing that I've seen over the 30 years of my work with with first responders. The idea of it's not manly to admit that I'm stressed out, I'm worried, I'm angry, I'm whatever. But there's no way that I would want to use a breathing technique, but I'll drink a pint of Crown Royal anytime. You ever run across that at all in the Marines?
Oh, yes, 100%. That is extremely common in a lot of first responder roles. So I think what happens is we have this mindset and mentality that, oh, you have to be strong. For some reason, taking some deep breaths are considered, weak. It's not your common practice. You should just, drink and punch it out. But really, that's not the case. I think when it comes to first responders, there's typically a environment that is high stress, right? There's the arriving on scene to multiple different things that you are never really truly prepared for as you walk into them, and dealing with them, you just kind of push it down, push it down, push it down, push it down, ignore it, ignore it, ignore it, ignore it. So we start looking for coping mechanisms or coping skills that are common, that are popular. We all have our own addictions, but there are certain addictions that are thought to be more, I don't know, lack of a better word, like friendly, more acceptable, right? So excess drinking seems to be more commonly accepted as a coping mechanism than just taking some time for yourself.
I know that some of our volunteers work with law enforcement and other first responders. I would like to hear from them. I know that some of them are on right now. I saw their names. Okay.
We did have a comment from Shelley who said, I think self-awareness is critical, being able to read our own emotional responses, knowing our triggers, and then actually following through on coping strategies.
Yeah. Doing that core action number 1, personal assessment on a regular basis, just common sense.
I think we don't make enough time for that. Like we, in our daily lives, as we sit here, we can say, oh, that's so important. We really needed to do that, but we don't actually carve out time in our day to do self-checks. Maybe setting that timer on your phone to go off every couple hours, or if you're going into a stressful event. I think of it when you're going out on a first date, right? You kind of set up the, hey, if I need a bailout option, right? Anybody heard of that? It's almost the same thing. Like if you're going into a stressful event, you're going into a stressful event, maybe setting a timer on your phone or setting a time to go off at 10 a.m. every day to do a self-check. That the more we do it, the more we build it up, the more likely that we'll start doing it naturally rather than waiting until, oh man, it's been a few weeks, I'm super stressed and super overwhelmed and I'm just now catching it.
Right. The one of the reasons why I really believe in the calming and breathing techniques of handling emotion has to do with the scientific study of how our mammalian bodies work. So just think of Peter Cottontail, the rabbit, and he's got a mammalian body. He's got little lungs, a heart, blood, adrenaline. So he's out there in a field and eating clover, and he's relaxed. His muscles are relaxed. His surface of his skin is dry and warm. Breathing is slow and even. Heart rate's normal. And then he sees a coyote. And through evolutionary process, what happens is that the parasympathetic nervous system, which had been dominant, now becomes non-dominant, and the sympathetic nervous system becomes dominant. And it begins to order the body to do certain things that are based on survival. For example, Heart rate speeds up. Why? Because we got to get that oxygen, blood to the lungs to pick up oxygen. And then along the way, it's got to get that adrenaline that's being secreted, because it's got to get that oxygen and adrenaline, to the long striated muscles, because we got to move the body to run away. Okay. And so that's what happens. Peter Cottontail gets all tight, gets his breathing heavily, has that adrenaline, and runs away and escapes. Okay, in our story, he escapes. And a half hour later, he's in an adjoining field, calm, body's dry and warm, breathing slow. And the thing about it is, you see, we have that same kind of response. That's what happens if we were being attacked by a grizzly bear in Glacier National Park. But you see, there's also a difference. Peter Cottontail has a really poor imagination and an even worse memory, because he has a little teeny beeny cerebral cortex, frontal lobe. We have this big frontal lobe, this big cerebral cortex. And so we can remember and we can imagine. And it's that memory and that imagination which triggers a body response. Because why? Because our body cannot tell the difference between a imagined scary, horrible scene and a real scary, horrible scene. And so we have to learn ways to overcome that sympathetic nervous system hyperarousal. And the breathing techniques are one of them. I want to go back to tactical breather. I mean, this is one of the tools developed by the military for its combat soldiers. And they call it tactical breather, to deal with that fear and anxiety after battle. I just want to underline that to all the macho folks out there. Okay. Hey guys, we're still on time. We're not too short or too long. Component 3, resolving problems. I'll take this one, Jessica. So what's the rationale? Well, the continuing problems and ongoing adversities can add to our stress level and can distract from self-care and help maintain traumatic stress reactions. So what we want to do is to learn problem solving as a tool. We want to learn how to break down overwhelming sets of problems into manageable chunks. And this tool can be used to tackle any kind of difficulty. Now, I know that probably every one of you has heard of the idea of problem solving, and every one of you considers yourself to be an expert problem solver. But I'm going to underline a few things to help you become an even better one. There's 4 steps to resolving problems. First is to define the problem and decide ownership. We'll get into that. Number 2 is setting the goal. 3 is brainstorming. 4 is evaluation and choosing the best solution. Okay, let's get into more detail. You know, the problem that I bet you every one of us has, we think we know how to problem solve, but we cut corners. we don't follow all the steps when we're doing problem solving. We sit down and say, oh, I'm going to solve this problem. And you go right to the answer you think without actually going through the steps in a rigorous, regimented way. Don't do that. Don't cut corners. Now, yes, it can feel artificial at first to walk through all the steps, but I want you to do it that way. The evidence supports problem solving used as a formal technique. Walking through all the steps, you become much more effective. So, step one, defining the problem. You ask yourself, what bothers me most now? And then you ask, well, how often does it happen? You make some notes. Who's involved? Make some more notes. How does it make me feel? Make some more notes. How does it impact me? You're really profiling the problem, like I used to profile criminals. You define the problem specificity. Okay, how specific does your problem need to be? For example, the problem of, damn, I got to get my life together again. You know, is that a problem that we can really address? That might be a little overly general. Let me put it this way. It is overly general. It's not specific enough. You know, improve my finances. Is that too general, or can I get more specific? Deciding where to live. In other words, when you define the problem, you need to be as specific as you can to be able to operationalize it. Next, you got to decide the ownership. Is this a problem happening between me and someone else? That's a problem you can do something with. Or is it a problem mainly happening to someone else or between other people? You know, for example, you're married and you have a teenage daughter, and your daughter and your wife have a significant personality conflict right now. Is that your problem? Or is it their problem? Now, I know what you're thinking. Hey, it's my problem. but you see, I mean, it's, yeah, in a sense, it's your problem. But another sense is it's the conflict is between your daughter and your wife. To get that problem solved, they're going to have to do something about it. Okay? So to have real impact, it's got to be a problem between you and something or someone else. You would handle a problem between your daughter and your wife in another way. Brainstorming. Well, this is where, again, I don't want you cutting corners. Identify different solutions. Write them down in your notebook. If you're having difficulty identifying solutions, ask how someone else would handle the problem. Ask a friend, well, how would you handle this kind of problem? After the list is generated, identify the potential consequences of each problem. Now, there's another pitfall while brainstorming, and that's the idea of solution. Totally solving the problem versus finding ways to improve the situation in ways that count. In real life, oftentimes totally solving the problem is unreasonable. Totally solving the problem might mean you had a spaceship and you could go to some other world. Unreasonable. But finding small ways to improve the situation might be realistic. So that's what you have to remember when brainstorming possible solutions. What are some examples of these possible, more realistic solutions? Well, for example, ways of calming oneself. Taking action on parts of the problem that are controllable, that you have. Learning and saying helpful things to oneself. Solutions that extend or build on things that are already helping. Getting help or support from other people. Now, when brainstorming possible solutions, it's always important to look at social support solutions. Why? Because social support is so important in recovery. So you want to have your list include, whenever possible, actions that enable or enhance that support. So you want to generate ideas that might involve seeking support or finding supportive situations or environments. So when do you stop generating solutions? Well, when you get if you get up to 10 ideas, you can quit. Or when you have really several really good, practical, and useful ideas on the list, you don't have to go to 10. Or you just can't think of any other ideas and you're only to 5. That's fine too. So then you want to agree with yourself on an action plan. So as the last part of choosing that best solution, you want to identify practical ways to activate the plan. You want to identify individuals you can enlist to help you to activate that plan. And you want to give yourself a pat on the back. So you want to take relatively small steps, and you don't want to make an unrealistic commitment. So for example, you would, if you have a financial issue, you wouldn't say, well, I'm going to have $1 million by Christmas. Unrealistic. And the actions you need to have some, even though small, they need to have some impact. Practicality and achievability are keywords. So we have a resolving problems job sheet to help you with this. So you write down, what problems do I, going through the steps that I've just enumerated, what problems do I want to resolve? What's my goal? What do I want to happen? You write that down. What are some of the resolutions? You brainstorm 5 to 10. What action from 3 above might be the best resolution option? And how do I implement it? Using the guidance that I've walked you through, you would use this job sheet to come up with that solution, that action. And here are some resolving problem apps to consider. These 3 apps have within them sections designed to help in this area. Life Armor, PTSD Coach, and Provider Resilience. You might notice that some of these tools keep coming up over and over again, and you'll see that. So let's take a look at a case vignette. Let's talk a little bit about it, Jessica. Have you had done any problem solving recently?
day is problem solving. So some problem solving is just some of the simple things. If something goes wrong, what's a backup plan? I'm definitely one of those people. My mom has always said, got to have a backup plan, got to have a backup plan. So working with a lot of communities who are disconnected and trying to find ways to connect them and bring them to the table and have conversations. So sometimes just taking a step back and saying, okay, there's clearly a problem here. I may not know what that problem is because I'm an outside source, but how can I talk to people individually to find out more about the problem that's going on so we can work through and resolve it?
How would we, let's talk about Betty a little bit. Well, can we think of a problem that, or somebody like Betty that would be typical?
I think for Betty's case, right, she's retired, her kids are grown. A problem might be feeling disconnected. So being able to feel more connected, being able to reach out to other people, especially during the pandemic, if she's not able to see people in person, maybe making phone calls, trying to connect. Her volunteer work may have gone down some. So maybe reaching out and seeing if there's some alternative options for her to volunteer, while maybe her more traditional volunteer options have been suspended.
Mm. I got a call last year. Well, no, this year, early on in the year. Seems like it was early on, it was last year, but from a volunteer who had a problem at the pod. Let me tell you what it was, and maybe you can help this person, hypothetically speaking. So what happened was that she was volunteering at a pod. She was quite excited about it. This was her first experience at volunteering, and she had a lot of experience. She's a professional healthcare professional. She's a healthcare professional. She's a mature woman, and she was talking to a citizen who was really anxious about getting the vaccination. And she was, kind of like in the process of checking this person in. She was part of the line that was processing all the citizens. And her supervisor came up and chewed her out. With the saying that she was slowing down the line and she needed to stop doing that. And she was, this particular volunteer was really, emotionally upset. She really felt she'd been disrespected, and she felt that that this health department employee was more concerned with bean counting or putting people through the line versus people. And so she had this problem. How would we brainstorm if that person came to us, because she was coming to me for guidance? How am I supposed to handle a problem like this? And she was even saying, I'm thinking about just quitting. I'm thinking about just archiving my name and not going to pods anymore. How can we walk her through this?
I think the big thing for this is the other individual involved clearly wasn't very attentive to the situation, or giving the benefit of the doubt. I like to say that I give the benefit of the doubt a lot, and that maybe having a conversation to the side saying, hey, some of these people that I'm checking in they're very overwhelmed, and they need a minute of somebody checking in. Is there a way we could get an extra volunteer over here so we could have these conversations with people so they feel more comfortable? That's that's part of it, right? We're increasing stress. People are anxious. People are fearful. They don't know what to think. I think even as a group, as a leadership dynamic, maybe having something, some type of signal or call to be able to alert to say, I'm not just over here chit chatting. I'm here caring for somebody. Maybe being able to say, actually, hey, I could use some help right now while I speak to this woman. Could you step in and help me move the line along? But a lot of that comes down to dynamics in the team and the willingness of the team members to be able to talk about it. And if there's some type of interpersonal conflicts to where those two team members might not be able to have that discussion, or that person's not open to that discussion, having someone else kind of moderate or mediate that situation and talk things out with them, saying, hey, we're all rushed, we're all under stress, we know we got to get this through, but we ultimately have to remember to take care of the people who are coming here for these vaccines as well.
Well, I agree with that, with what you're saying. But let's back up for a second. It's like, let's think, okay, is this a problem? I mean, first off, this is after the fact. I mean, it happened, the day before she called me. But then I suspect this could easily happen again. It seems so common in a sense. So would this kind of a problem be between that person and somebody else, or is it somebody else's problem or some other people's problem? Well, no, it is. It's a problem between me or her and somebody else. Okay, so and is it something that she wants to resolve? Yeah. Well, it would realistically, wouldn't it be nice if everybody was all people at the pod were reasonable people? and wouldn't that be nice? Well, that would be nice, but that's unrealistic. Okay, so then we begin to think, okay, what is it that I can do? How can I break this problem down? What's my goal? Well, maybe I need to do a couple of things. Maybe I need to brainstorm some things that I could do and say at that moment to that supervisor that might deflect something. And maybe I could also think about developing some handling emotion and maybe some corrective self-talk things that I could do with myself to handle, for John Call, rising anger. But for Betty, it might be depression and feeling unwanted.
And so what all was going on for that particular worker as well, and what kind of support systems, if that interaction alone made her feel like, I'm done, I don't want to do this anymore, that maybe there was more to it as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, you can see how this is a real life complicated issue, but how beginning to walk through in detail, and we're just beginning to touch it in our discussion, we could begin to develop a more sophisticated, concrete way of guiding ourselves or helping somebody if they were consulting with us to not only interact with that supervisor, but also interact with our own emotional and cognitive response. Okay.
We do have a comment from Susan. When we don't know the trigger which precedes the reaction, people arriving for COVID vaccines who are anxious and fearful of this disease and the vaccine, servicemen and women returning home from Afghanistan, we can be caught off guard. Lots of empathy is needed as we try to respond in a meaningful, supporting way. This seems to be a situation any of us might find ourselves in unexpectedly, whether we are working as a volunteer in a natural disaster in our community or a family member of a returning service member. I'm looking forward to hearing about empathy.
Ah, okay, good. Well, guys, coffee break. And we're going to take a break until 2:40. See you then. Social class antagonisms, religious animosities, and other hostile attitudes towards individuals and groups can be activated and realized in violent behavior. This thesis was illustrated in author's study of what happened during the alleged plague sowers during the Black Plague and the massacre of Jews, of so-called witches, and cats believed to be witches' familiars during the Black Plague. So that's something you don't see so much in a tornado or a hurricane, but in the continuous stress that goes on for month after month after month, and the paranoia that develops by the fear and anxiety of a pandemic in the past resulted in the massacre of even cats thought to be the familiars of witches. Hello, QAnon. So, component 4, confidence building. Jessica.
Yes, as we talk about confidence building has a lot to do with the thoughts about ourselves and the thoughts about the events that happen around us, because it really shapes how we feel and how we act. You know, there's those learned stressors, right, through experience, and then there's those taught stressors that we're just told to be aware of. Then those distressing thoughts can maintain negative emotions, often very negative emotions, and we can change the focus of those thoughts, right? So if we try and focus more on things that will make us hopeful and help us get through these, and maybe a little less overwhelming as we go through these stressful experiences, we want to focus on the helpful thoughts to improve our mood and pave ways for better and more effective coping mechanisms going forward. So with confidence building, you have the activating event, right? And the belief of the said event, which really equals out to that emotional behavioral aspect side that we have, right? So you have an activating event, for example, like the story you just shared, Dr. Paul, in regards to the Black Plague, right? The activating event, this plague affecting everyone. And then the belief was that, oh, these witches were causing it. So everyone was jumping on board with it, the witches causing it, the witches causing it. So then it kind of turned into this very emotionally driven response to where people were angry, they were acting out, and they were killing innocent people because they believed that they were witches.
Yeah, let me jump in here and give another example. Let's say, which is one that I've seen. Let's say you have the activating event, i.e., you are at the airport and your flight is delayed, okay? And then we see the emotional, behavior, physiological consequence. We see one person just pounding their fist on the table and cursing and just really being upset, red in the face, okay? Then we see another person standing right beside them, same activating event. They've been told that, hey, the flight's delayed, it's going to be a couple of hours. This person walks away, sits down, picks up their drink and opens up their iPad, begins reading a book. Why? It's the same event. Why the different emotional, behavioral, physiological consequence? It's because of what they're saying inside their head. Right now, all of you, Jessica Rose, Teresa, myself, every one of you is talking inside of your head. We call it thinking. And what are we saying to ourselves? So in my example, that one guy who's all angry, he's saying something that's like, gosh, dang it, I can't take this. I gotta be there. I am so frustrated. This is really driving me crazy. Whereas the other guy's saying something different, saying, well, it's not gonna, nothing I can do about it. I'll just, pick up and I'll read my Horatio Hornblower book about, adventure story. It's what we say to ourselves inside our head that really is the key. Jessica.
That actually happened recently to me too. I was supposed to get in at 4 p.m. and I got in at 1 a.m. So yes, that's a really great example that I think a lot of us can relate.
Were you the guy pounding on the?
No, I wasn't. Though there was a guy we were pretty sure wasn't going to get on the plane because of how intoxicated he became. I'm not really sure what happened to him, but just looking at the experience, and I was very grateful for the connections I made while sitting in the airport and the people that I met and the people I was able to help while I was there. So kind of that perspective part of it is, well, I can't make the plane go faster. I can't, I'm not a pilot. I can't just jump on and fly the plane myself, right?
Well, have you picked up on all of these reports of people being aggressive on planes? Have you heard about all this stuff? Mm-hmm. And and supposedly, the way they're reporting it, it's like they're being more aggressive than they were like 2 or 3 years ago.
I think that deals with the fact that there's already so much fear and stress. So when you walk into the airport now, right, you're dealing with the pandemic, right? You're dealing with masks. I couldn't tell you how many times on each plane that I was on, reiterated, it's a federal mandate. You will get kicked off this plane. You need to pull your mask up. How many times the flight attendant was coming by, pull your mask up, mask, mask, mask. So that heightened already. People are building and building and building and building. So once a plane's delayed 10 minutes, that's just another level on top of the experience they're already enduring.
Yeah. And again, this is, I think, a beautiful, a real example of the long-term stress impact of a pandemic on a society. And one of the reasons why we need Reboot and Providing Care.
Right. Definitely taking that step back and seeing what are the little things that we could be doing to work on a regular basis to prepare us for when we are in the airport and when things do get a little hectic.
Right.
Well, one of our goals is obviously taking a look at those negative thoughts, right? So what was the negative thought that really made the man so mad he was banging on the counter? And then obviously that thought, right, affected how he was feeling and how he was behaving himself in the airport. And we want to identify and practice healthy ways to think about those stressful events. So like the example I used where I'm not the pilot, I can't get on the plane and fly it, but I can take advantage and meet people while I'm here and see who I can be a help. Confidence building is not the same as positive thinking though, right? Because positive thinking is very simplistic. Like,
yeah, everything's going to be all right. The pandemic's going to be gone but in 2 weeks, guys. It's gone. Yeah. It's going to be nothing.
It's fine. Like, totally fine. I get that a lot where sometimes people are like, oh, you're so positive. I'm like, oh, positive, or trying to remain this sense of realism, because negative thoughts are sometimes accurate. That's why we have it on there, right? Is that there's definitely those times where, so my story actually started at 6 a.m. when I found out that they rebooked me to a flight the next day because my flight was delayed. And I thought, well, that's not going to work because my event is tomorrow. I can't fly out in the middle of tomorrow, right? So I'm like, well, this sucks, but now what? Our thought of—
That's when you do problem solving, right?
Yeah, problem solving, exactly. I had to talk to 2 different airlines to get it fixed. And it was a very crazy situation, but it worked out in the end. Either I was going to make the event or I wasn't going to make the event. So working through and really reflecting on that experience and finding the things that I can focus on that are beneficial going forward, that are going to help keep me energized and keep me going. I think that's with everything in our life, right? So that's what we're trying to build here, is build the confidence to get through it, right? Because that's really our option, is to get through it. Our 4 main steps for this section on confidence building is identifying the unhelpful thoughts. So just like we talked earlier about naming it, right? What is it? So identifying that, and then identifying the useful thoughts. So what can we replace those bad thoughts with? And then practicing, rehearsing those thoughts, and then assigning a practice of useful thoughts. So making it a regular part of our day. So when we identify the unhelpful thoughts as we're building confidence, we have a job sheet for that as well. So you can identify and record the negative thoughts that are coming in and becoming overwhelming and repeating. And as we continue to identify those unhelpful thoughts, we want to start looking at some questions that might get us to dig a little bit deeper. Maybe we don't know right off the bat. So some good questions to start with is, what has been bothering you the most since the beginning of the pandemic, right? Because there's something that has bothered everybody. Life did not stop. Life just got a little bit heavier, right? What goes through your mind when you think about the pandemic and your current situation? So a lot of times that alone can be very stressful. The different changes in your life, structure, those kind of things. What are you most afraid of nowadays? Because I guarantee whatever you feared 5-10 years ago is not the fears that are in the front lines today of your mind. And what makes you feel the worst about yourself or about how your life is going now? So as we start answering those questions, we can start linking those thoughts with our emotions that tie all this in. Remember our ABC here. So once we find those unhelpful thoughts and we can describe them, then we can start looking at the emotions tied to them. How do you feel about yourself? Or how do you feel about your situation when you have these thoughts, right? Or what happens to your energy level, right? The energy level goes down a lot when we're overwhelmed, when we're stressed, and we have all these negative thoughts. So as we identify the negative thoughts, we identify the emotions, how it changes our energy, then we want to start moving towards what's the other side of that. So identifying and clarifying by writing down alternatives to our situation, alternatives to those negative thoughts, to try and get our brain to focus on something else. And as helpful thoughts are generated, they take time to build up that positive feeling that we associate with each thought, right? So we have our negative thought, transitioning it to a more useful thought, and trying to change that feeling of the overall situation. So when you think about unhelpful thoughts, some other questions to help you identify that I should have prevented this. So helpful alternative thoughts, maybe saying instead of shoulda, woulda, coulda, right? The evil sisters there. What could we do? What feelings do you think might go along with the thoughts as you start to develop and change these unhelpful thoughts into useful thoughts?
You know, before the break, somebody asked about how do we enhance empathy. And this is one tool that will help you reestablish that empathy. Let's brainstorm some, just briefly, a useful thought about empathy and ourselves. What might you come up with, Jessica Rose?
I think when I think of empathy, I kind of tie it into grace as well, is that we are all doing the best we can with what we have. So oftentimes we're our own worst critic, right? Is that, for example, if someone in your household, it tests positive for COVID, right? Oh, should have done this, should have done that, should have done this. You know, how could I have let this happen? We start building those negative thoughts, that just giving yourself like a second to breathe, giving yourself a little bit of grace, that we're all doing the best we can. And now what can you do? Show yourself some love, because I guarantee all of us are keeping it together. You have your families, you have your finances, you have your jobs, your friends, all of life. That one little piece doesn't end up perfect. It's okay. And you're okay. I think that's a big part of it, is empathy for ourselves. It's just understanding we're not perfect. And if something does happen, that we can still work through it. And it doesn't mean that we're a bad person.
For you guys in the audience, I would appreciate some of you who have practiced this to actually put into chat, put in some useful thought having to do with, a helpful alternative thought about enhancing your own empathy. What might you say to yourself, or what might you recommend to another one of us, another volunteer, about what they could say to themselves to help build that empathy within themselves. And I would be interested in you writing that out and then share. And Teresa, if somebody or some folks do that, we can talk about at the end of this section. So step 3, Jessica Rhodes.
So step 3 is really rehearsing those useful thoughts, right? Because we can come up with all these great ideas, but if we don't put them to use, they're not useful. So practicing focusing on the positive thoughts, the useful thoughts that are going to help us get through situation, being realistic instead of the unhelpful thoughts. And then briefly considering the situations that these unhelpful thoughts occur most, so we can start to prepare is that I think this way a lot when this happens. How can I try and get different thoughts in place to prepare me for when this happens again or a similar situation happens? So picture some of these situations and practice the useful thoughts. Say them out loud. It's one way to really counter the negative thoughts, that it's training your brain. Just like, you pick up a weight, you train your muscles. You want to train your brain by practicing these thoughts so that they'll be there and ready to use when it's time to use them.
So true, because if you pay attention to your self-talk, you'll find that you are talking to yourself all the time. And, a little self-disclosure here, I find that that a lot of times I am saying something negative. I get frustrated, I get angry, particularly when I watch the news. And then I start, in my head, start saying negative things, which are not helpful. And I say negative things about myself even. Step 4.
So step 4 is assigning the practice to those helpful thoughts. So the key to useful thinking is to, again, rehearse it, making it part of your daily routine and using those thoughts to really help mobilize and energize you. And looking at the alternative thoughts are, if they're realistic or if they're not realistic. That kind of goes back to how we were talking about it's confidence building different than positivity, right? We're not saying everything is sunshine and rainbows and everything's going to be perfect all the time. Everything will be just fine. Maybe that's not necessarily true, because for most of us, we've lost a loved one over the past year or two, and it may be related to COVID, may not be related to COVID, but that doesn't mean that, oh, life's still going to be fine. Life's going to be perfectly fine. No, you give yourself some grace, give yourself some time to be able to grieve in what you've been through and work through it to make sure that next time when something stressful comes up, you're working towards being able to say things to yourself that'll help guide you and carry you through that stressful event. Here's the example of the confidence building job sheet with some of the questions that we talked about. So identifying those unhelpful thoughts, those negative thoughts that really just de-energize us and bring us down, and then trying to find what would the alternative be? What are some useful thoughts we can swap those out with? Again, a great app is the PTSD Coach. So lots of information in there, tools for screening, tracking your symptoms. So that way, maybe if you're out and you don't have a chance to journal or write it down and get it out, you can go into the app and you can track some of those symptoms and go back later and really review what it felt like in that moment when you were stressed out and what were some of those negative thoughts coming in and how you can work towards replacing them moving forward.
So, Teresa, did anybody give us some suggested?
Yes, a lot of people said that they deal with anxiety over the pandemic. They've dealt with a lot of anxiety over the pandemic that has been passed to children through adults. Absolutely, kids pick up on everything that's going on around us. Grace is exactly what we need. We were there, we did what we could. While it is not perfect, we were there. It was important that we were there. It gives us a chance to come back and do better next time. Every encounter gives us a chance to reach someone.
That is a great positive thought for rebuilding empathy in a realistic manner and to practice. That is excellent.
Absolutely. I tell people that when you go out running, it's not necessarily the pace that you're running, but you got out of bed and put your shoes on. And so regardless of how far or how fast, you did something which is better than 90% of the people that are still in bed. So yeah, absolutely. That's a huge positive way of looking at it. Some other folks have been saying, I've been working on taking my negative thought, writing it down, and then spinning it into a more positive thought. That's very good too. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it helps to remind myself that I don't have to be perfect, just the best I can be. Yeah, absolutely. Didn't we all just see that with Simone Biles? I mean, even the best are not a perfect 10 every time. Sometimes they need a break too.
Yeah, when that happened to Simone Biles, I said to my wife, that happened to me when I was in the 8th grade, and I clutched on my trombone solo. My wife says, "It's not the same, John."
A good documentary to watch is The Weight of Gold. If you're interested, especially in what's been going on in the Olympics, The Weight of Gold, it talks about Olympic athletes. And that also ties into our conversation about first responders on how we put so much value in what people do and not who people are, and how sometimes we forget that they're still a person. So I noticed somebody else had mentioned that in the chat too, that everyone is a person and they know what the best that they can do in that moment.
I am learning that to extend my empathy to others, I have to be okay with the feelings I am having first. Yes, absolutely. I think I said this in one of the breakout sessions, is that there's a reason why every time you get on a plane, they tell you that if there's an emergency, you have to put your oxygen mask on first, because you can't help anyone else if you are not okay to begin with.
Right.
I have decided that I want to be the person that will always make others smile. It has challenged me to adjust my negative thoughts. That's good. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Remind myself we're all doing the best we can right now, and that each person is the only one who knows what the best they can do is, not what would be convenient for me. Yeah, and I think that's what Jessica Rose was just mentioning. A lot of people talking about just trying to have more positivity. I think back to how I have felt in the past and remind myself that even though I don't understand why this person feels like this now, I know that it is painful, upsetting for them to think back to how I felt when things were painful to me. Oftentimes it helps me not to respond in a manner that would escalate the situation. Yeah, absolutely. As vaccine rates have slowed down, it's very easy to get caught in our heads, to think we could have done more, and that's true. Here in Oklahoma County, we had a location where we went to 3 times. The first time we did 10, the second time we did 10, the third we did 48. We never know the impact we are having when we are at a location. What may feel like a failure could very well be the thing that gives someone the information they need to make a better choice. Yeah, absolutely. I kind of liken it to the It's a Wonderful Life effect. You just never know how many other people you've touched, but you have, in ways that you may have no idea.
I like to think with that, it's like how many people have touched our lives that we haven't personally told that they've touched our lives. And that really gives people the perspective to think how many other people that we are touching their lives. So I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Stephen says, teaching scuba diving, we always teach, breathe, never hold your breath, always in and out. Same is true of dealing with a difficult situation such as the pandemic. Absolutely. And then I don't know how healthy it has actually been. Lately, I am learning that I have somewhat ignored my feelings about my own health by helping others to cope with theirs. That's an interesting perspective too.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Thank you guys for sharing. Don't stop. So component 5 of our fifth of our 6 core actions is activity planning. I'll take this one. The rationale for activity planning is regardless of the reason why, we know that people become depressed or down or apathetic when they don't engage in pleasurable activities. And I certainly noticed that over the last year, being holed up in my home. Whoops. Yeah, there we go. So the goal of activity planning is to restore a sense of control and normalcy by helping to decrease feelings of sadness or hopelessness, fearfulness, or general lack of energy by making time for activities that are important for our own health, physical health, behavioral health, and connection with others. So when would you use activity planning? Well, you would use it when feeling down or apathetic, when there's been a disruption of normal routines and activities in your life, and there's low involvement in pleasant and positive activities. So basic 2 steps. Identify and plan one or more activity, and then schedule it on a calendar. Again, being concrete in following these steps and not cutting corners. Things to try. Be creative and flexible. For example, one of the things I did early on in the pandemic was I couldn't go out so much. So one was to explore ways that I could interact with people using MMOs, massive multiplayer online games. That's just me killing trolls with my sword electronically and working and meeting people on these moves across the world. So you focus on meaningful activities versus enjoyable activities. Well, do the best you can to meet that question. Problem solve around possible barriers like transportation, money, safety concerns, or you can't go out. So maybe use a computer. Step 1, identify and plan a positive activity. So you want to review a list of activities. You want to brainstorm other activities that are maybe not on that list. Include those that provide some relaxation, a sense of safety, coping with a new situation, increasing social time. So identify at least 3 different activities to engage in the next week. And when choosing those, you want to think about the ones that are enjoyable, achievable, and practical. So that's selecting the activity. Step 2 is just scheduling it in a calendar. Use a calendar and make a concrete plan so that you don't get caught in a downward spiral. Review the activity after a week and its effects. What did you do? How did you feel before and after the activity? If there's no improvement in your mood, revisit the rationale. Take time for effects, or they're gradual, cumulative usually, is there a learning curve to that activity? Modify or assign a new activity if things are not working out. So we have an activity planning job sheet. What is it? First, you've got to consider the activities. Look at indoor activities, look at outdoor activities, look at social activities, look at community activities. During a pandemic, when you're not supposed to go out, it might be somewhat, you might have to be quite creative. Instead of having a book club, for example, that you attend physically and drink wine or coffee and discuss the book, maybe your book club will meet virtually. Then you make your plan. You select 1 to 3 activities, you schedule it on the calendar, and then you list the things maybe you need for that activity. Then a week later, you review. There is one particular app, an activity planning app, that might be helpful for you, and it is called Jackpot. Positive Activity Jackpot. It's specifically designed to help select enjoyable activities. So that's one to look at seriously as a resource.
That one is also password protected. I kind of laughed a little bit that there is a password protection on it. Don't think there's too much on there that you might be worried somebody would get into, but it is a fun one. It gives a lot of ideas, and you can select different categories if you want to do something outside or indoor, or it'll pull the handle and you'll get all kinds of random stuff to give you ideas of things to do. It's a fun one for sure.
And it also, I found that it will analyze your location and look at different activities in your area of Oklahoma, and suggest things that you might do. I thought was, wow, that's interesting. Okay, we are moving right along. If we get done before our scheduled time, I'll be happy, and I'm sure everybody will too. So let's just continue on with component 6, making connections. Jessica Rose.
Making connections, definitely one of my favorite things. Like I said in the airport, that's what my focus was, is how many people I can meet, how many people I can help. So the big thought behind this is that social supports, right? Well, positive social supports are extremely beneficial and being key protective factors like peer support groups. And then having that lack of support could be a really poor outcome in life with not having the different supports around us. So social supports could be friends, it could be family, it could be your community resources, the things that you're involved with, things that you want to enhance your recovery after events and keep you emotionally and physically in check as you move forward to be prepared for the next stressful event. So our goals of this section, increase connections to positive relationships. That is a bit of the key, right? And to our community supports. So not just our friends and family, who else do we have in our community? Because people are often feeling isolated for many reasons. They're dislocated from their communities, right? Either spread out here in Oklahoma, maybe you're a little far away from different community resources. Maybe you've lost friends and family due to death, due to moving, due to situational changes, and then having those depressive symptoms setting in, because like we talked earlier, with all the things building, right? Being in an airport is very stressful because it's all the things that build up that overwhelm us. So the different things that we need, these support networks, right? We need community resources around us. Is those support networks, sometimes we have difficulties finding supportive relationships. So having a wider support network, maybe finding someone, I like to say it's your flavor of ice cream, right? We're not all each other's flavor of ice cream. So having a wide range of net of people that you can pull off of. You need that support system when you're feeling overwhelmed, when you're feeling isolated, having people you can reach out to, and wanting to be available to provide support, but maybe you're avoiding others. So having those volunteer bases, or again, those community supports that can help you help others, even if you are feeling isolated, other people reaching out to you. Identifying a change in current relationships that may impact us negatively. So maybe we've come to realize something about a relationship we have had with somebody that needs to change, or maybe that relationship needs to end. And then limited social supports or lack of certain connections to meet our overall needs. Sometimes when we address this and we look at it, we find out we're actually missing some key components that we could really use in our lives. So there's 3 steps to this section that we're going to be talking about, and it's really developing our community connections diagram. We're going to review the community connections diagram, and then we're going to make a community care blueprint to go forward. So that first step, really creating the diagram, right? So very visual. We talked about journaling and writing and using that creative brain. Well, we're kicking in a little bit of that here. So using some pens and paper, draw things out, and you want to find what's your most important social connections or most important relationships that you have, and start writing them out. But you only want to put people who are readily accessible. So not somebody who, oh, if I text them, I'll hear back from them in a week. That's not quite where we're going here, right? So start with people in your community, people that you see on a regular basis, that you could, maybe your neighbor, you walk over to their house or you talk to them regularly. And then you want to kind of expand that diagram out to maybe those friends that you only talk to on the phone, or you only text or communicate through email. And make sure you're putting in individuals, maybe groups, different organizations. So all those different support connectors. And the goal is that you want your 10 core connectors on this diagram. So some of the examples, you have mother, father, you have your significant other, maybe children, medical support, whether therapist, primary care, your mentors, your friends, your faith-based community, if you have siblings, or even your colleagues and coworkers, or other types of community groups like running groups or meetup groups, those kind of things is what you're looking at building your diagram with. So as you review this diagram, you want to look, who are your most important connections right now? Who can you share your experiences and feelings with? Because there's some connections we have that maybe we can't really share openly about our experiences or feelings. And then who can you get advice from to help you as you move through your recovery and you move through this pandemic? And who can you, or who do you want to spend time with socially? Because maybe there's people on your list that you can rely on, and maybe there's people that you really desperately need that connection in person time. And who might need your help or your support within your diagram. So as we're reviewing this, we also want to look at what else is needed, what else is missing. So what are the other supports that you need that aren't currently on your diagram? Maybe there's a specific type of emotional support or physical support that you need, or community group that you need. Are there loved ones or friends who you aren't connected with, but you'd really like to be connected with? And who do you want to spend more time with, and who do you want to spend less time with? Because as we reevaluate some of these relationships, some of our relationships are going to be really positive, and there might be some that aren't so positive that we need to readdress how much time we're spending with that person or with that group. And are there relationships that you think need improvement? So ones that you have that you're maintaining, but you would like them to be better. And are there ways of helping others around you, helping others in your community that you can get involved in? Do you want to increase your social activities, or do you want to be able to join other groups to give back? So now that we've drafted out our plan here, we're kind of reviewing our plan here, we're really developing a blueprint to move forward with our plan. So you want to identify areas that need improvement. So one of our examples is maybe you're already connected in a relationship, but that relationship needs improvement. So you find one area to change, and you want to make an action plan and really map that out. What does that look like? What does improving your relationship with your significant other mean? Is it an hour of dedicated time with that person per day, or maybe one night per week? So that's the kind of things you want to get really specific and detail out what you should do and what your plans are to do.
let me just jump in here. This is a community connections diagram. And what you can do is take the piece of paper like Jessica Rose was saying, and you're in the middle, and you just like on the upper right-hand corner, just have a friends list, have a in the lower right-hand corner, a community list, neighbors list over here on the left, and family list. Okay.
I love that diagram because it shows that you're in the center and all the things that you connect out to and all the things that connect back to you.
Right.
So as we move forward, where we're creating our blueprint on how we're going to be better connected to our communities and have better positive relationships, and finding that one area that we want to change, and we're asking ourselves, what do I want to happen? So sticking with the example of, I want to improve my relationship with my significant other. What does that look like? What are some of the things you want that to happen? And then who could you ask for support? Maybe you have a mentor who has a really great relationship with their significant other, and asking them, hey, what are some things that you do that build on your relationship? And finding when is the right time and when is the right place. So for this example, right, working with your significant other, saying, hey, can we sit down and talk? I really want to put more into our relationship. And I think it would be really great if we had an hour of dedicated time once a week, right? I want to make this relationship, I want to put in more into this relationship. So really starting that request with the I message on what your needs are and what you're looking for. And then after the connection, just really kind of confirming with that person and thanking them for their time, especially when you're reaching out to mentors. So making connections, that PTSD Coach app, again, has a lot of really great tools to track things. You can easily manage symptoms and build lists right in the app.
So like, I think one example, I've already mentioned it from my life, that I really leaned on a lot, particularly when there was lockdown, was my use of computer gaming. What about you, Jessica? Of course, you did it. You were doing a lot of training, weren't you?
Yes,
Still
definitely.
are.
Yes, lots of training, lots of connecting. It looks a little different now because we're not in person. So that in-person connection, that's something that I personally thrive off of and I love. So it's one thing that I've really missed during this time, is trying to learn and develop how I can continue to stay connected to people through a screen and make relationships through a screen.
Teresa, are you doing face-to-face teaching, or are you mainly doing virtual teaching?
By and large, we're still doing online teaching. At the college, we're back to face-to-face, but it's all of our students have been vaccinated, so we don't have other limitations to that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, Teresa, do you want to lead off on the post-test? Or do you want me to do it? You want to do it? Okay, great. Hey guys, post-test. But we're going to do this together. Okay.
All right. A pandemic is an acute, localized disaster. Is that true or false?
Go ahead and type it in, guys, into chat. And let me know, Teresa, when I should give the.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
All right, very good. Okay, second question. CARE stands for Community, Assessment, Alignment, Resilience, and Empathy. True or false? What do you guys think? You can put it in the chat. True. Yes, very good.
It's true.
All right. Number 3, which of the following is not one of the 5 components of CARE? And you can put A, B, C, D, or E. People are saying A, personal responsibility.
You're right. It's personal assessment.
Good. Okay, number 4. Which of the following is a goal of the core action handling emotions? And choose all that apply. And again, you can just put A, B, C, or D, or all, or A and B, or whatever you think. There they go. Oh. Okay. Very good.
It's A and B.
Sorry, first 2. I forgot what the answers were.
Yeah, it's A and B. Question 5.
To make an action plan regarding personal assessment, one should use which of the following? Bunch of people saying C, C and D maybe. B and C.
Personal assessment, one wants to use the CARE screening form and a CARE skills selection chart.
Job.
Question 6.
Which of the following is not an action step for problem solving?
This might be a tough one.
Looks like it's kind of split between A and D.
Well, there's the answer.
Doggone it, it was C. Which of the following is a rationale for confidence building? And choose all that apply. Have several alls.
Okay,
E,
they're right. It's all that apply, all of them. Question 8.
what core action uses the community connections diagram? D. Yep, looks like everybody's saying D.
Well, the key word there, guys, is connections.
All right. Number 9, name one good confidence building mobile smartphone app to consider. You can just type any of them in there.
I think we only gave that one.
A lot of them, I think, probably cross through some things as well. But yeah, you guys are all naming a good number of the apps that they have mentioned. Yeah, good. Oh, we got the answers already. Name 3 mobile apps Oh, go ahead.
There we go.
Mention the training which you are most interested in downloading.
There you go.
And I think a lot of you have already mentioned the PTSD coach, life armor, PTSD. Yep.
Okay, we have a poll question now. There's the poll question, guys. How likely is it you will download one or more of these behavioral apps mentioned? It's what I like to see.
And you know, the great thing about these apps too, is that if you do download one and you play around with it and you decide that you really don't like it, you can just delete it. I mean, honestly, and there's 8 up here that they have mentioned over the presentation, but like I said, if you don't like one, delete it and try another one. I mean, there's 8 of them to choose from.
That's right. And plus we have the job sheets if you don't like using apps, and not everybody does. Not everybody likes a smartphone or has a tablet. And we have the job sheets. And remember that as we said earlier, you can download the booklet that kind of gives a brief overview of this presentation, and in that booklet are the job sheets.
Okay, I just put the booklet, the website to the booklet in the chat again. And it looks like a bunch of you have already downloaded some of these and have already been using them. And it looks like some of you probably downloaded some during the presentation, which is great. I know that I've used the PTSD app from the VA, which is fantastic. So yeah, that's good to hear from you guys.
Okay, guys, it is time for you to take charge. Why? Because the future is now. And that's what this program's all about. This program is about learning or relearning self-administered tools that we can use to be more resilient and to be more empathetic as necessary. And you might not need them now. You might do a personal assessment and you might be okay, but maybe 6 months from now, maybe 3 months from now, you do a personal assessment, and it might be worthwhile to do the handling emotions core action or the making connections core action. Why? Because it's not over yet. It is not over yet. Again, this is the link to the booklet. Teresa, about the evaluation, what kind of guidance can you give us for the training evaluation link or whatever?
I will actually email that to everyone later.
Okay. Hey guys, this I'm going to be really interested in your evaluation, because doing a 2.5-hour virtual presentation, Jessica Rose and I and Teresa, we spent a lot of time thinking, because it's like it's not like doing it face to face. I really prefer doing it face to face. I could bring you guys, I know you guys. I know a lot of you folks, and you've been to my trainings before, and I would bring you up and we could have one-to-one conversations, and I could go out there and walk around you. And I can't do that in this virtual stuff, but we need to have some contact. So any kind of suggestions, or saying, hey, this part was really helpful, I really liked it when you did that, when you and Jessica did this or whatever, or if you did more of that, anything like that is going to be helpful. I think for once in my life, I might listen to somebody's suggestion. I don't know, but I'm asking for you to help me out. So those who can do more, volunteer. That's the motto of SRT Incorporated. I know that I bet you all of you are already members of OKMRC. I want to hear from you. If you're not already a group member of the OKMRC closed group page, you need to join that. I've also opened up a new page that's called SRT. I think it was, I would like people to join. What happened was that during I had an older Facebook page that was SRT Inc. and the Oklahoma Stress Response Team, Medical Reserve Corps Stress Response Team, and it got locked down. This is going to be an interesting story, guys. I got locked out by Facebook, and you know why? I was tracking it because some Russian in Leningrad took control of it during the election last November. I just couldn't believe it. I could not believe it, but it's true. So I had to open up a new page in the John Call Facebook page. God, I tell you, the world's crazy. So anyway, I know you've already asked your questions. I want to thank everybody. But if you do happen to have a question, we'll sit here for a minute. I promised you that I would not go over, and I didn't. And I also promised you that we would probably end a little early, and we are. And if you have any questions, just type them up there for Teresa. We'll give you 60 seconds.
Well, Dr. Call, this is Leslie Carter, and I just wanted to speak up and thank you so much. This was a wonderful training, and I'm so excited that you're able to share it with all of us today. It's great tools that I think we all need after the past year and a half that we've been living through. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Leslie. And Jessica Rose, thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a joy and a pleasure getting to talk with everyone today. And I've been trying to follow along in the chat. So thank you all so much for being here.
And Teresa, thank you. I think we made a good team, Jessica Rose and Teresa.
Yes, things went really smoothly. I do have, and I want to just thank all of our presenters today for giving up their Saturday to give us this valuable information. We always appreciate it. I do have a couple of comments real quick. Stephen Hale would like to speak with the District 1 coordinator. So if anyone can help us out with that.
Hi, Stephen. Yes, I'll send an email to that's Sandy Settle and also Debbie Kaufman, Debbie Maley, and let them know that you'd like to get in touch with them. That's Stephen Hale. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then there was one more. Diane can't get the link for the
Booklet.
The booklet. I'm going to put it into the chat again. If you want to just click on it. So open up your chat and just click on this link. It should open it up for you.
And also, If you go to SRTINC.com to the blog page, the last blog, the most recent blog has the link too.
Is that your Facebook page?
No, that's SRT's website.
Okay.
That's www.oksrtinc.com. And if you, hey guys, if you haven't been to that website, please visit it. It's interesting.
I put in the
correct.
link specifically for that blog post in the chat as well.
Okay, so whomever it was that needed the link, the SRT link is on there as well. So just go ahead and click on that, and that should open it straight up. All right, let me look real quick. Okay, it looks like that is it.
Very good, thank you. Should I do a stop share, Teresa?
Yeah, that's fine. All right. Well, thanks everybody. If I'll be on here for just a few more minutes if you have another question or anything that you didn't get a chance to ask. But otherwise, thank you all for spending your Saturday with us. We appreciate your time. We appreciate all the hard work that you do. And I hope you have a good rest of your Saturday. So thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. Oh, Teresa, I see we have a question from Stephen Hale looking for the eval form.
So Stephen, I'm going to email it to everyone. So as long as I had your first and last name, I'll know who actually attended. So for those of you that were not able to put in your first and last name, just put that in the chat now so that I can link those people up, because like some of the profiles just have numbers. I have absolutely no idea who that is. All right. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Val and Kathleen are interested in SART. Who do we contact?
Well, to kind of join the SART mailing list, you can go under your skills on your OKMRC profile and add animal response for large animals or small animals or both. I mean, that'll kind of get you on the mail list, but you can also get in contact with Dr. Gorzica Sutherland, who was presenting earlier. And that's a long, hard name to spell out, but I will put that in the chat in just a second, as soon as I can double check the email.
Yeah, I agree, Rick. There's a lot of people that do not like, they won't turn their they don't want to have their camera on, which I totally understand. And they don't like speaking up as well. So yeah, it is even less personal. But sometimes that's the only way we can get, people to at least put their thoughts down so that we can read them out. But yeah. Yep, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, with the medical students, it's actually a much smaller group, so hand raising is a little more manageable.
Yeah, especially when you've got a smaller class and you can actually see all of them on one page as opposed to multiple pages.
I agree. Anyway, great program. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. You're new to Zoom and can't find the camera option. Well, so Zoom is sort of all encompassing. So there's nothing specifically you have to do, but you do have to have a camera on your laptop, or you can do it on your smartphone, which has a camera. So as long as you have a camera on your laptop, it automatically is set up for you. Okay, any last questions? Okay, everybody, I think let you write down the email, please. Oh, sure.
Oh, I was also going to say, Dr. G's email, you see, I go for the nickname every time as well. But if you need that information, you can go on the OKMRC website and do a Find MRC unit. And in there, it has contact information for all of our statewide units. And it has her email and her name fully spelled out for you right there. Sorry, I didn't think of that option before I typed it all out too. Rhonda, the Monday Zoom call that I mentioned, you should have received an email about that. If you're an OKMRC volunteer, the days all blend together. I think I sent that on Wednesday this week, definitely. But you can also go to the calendar on okmrc.org and you will see it's listed on the calendar on August 9th, the OSDH Nursing Support Strike Team Informational Zoom meeting. You click on that and you can sign up for it. That's just so we kind of know how many people will be on the meeting, but then it also has the link to join the web meeting on that.
Okay, did all of you get the information you needed from the chat? Perfect. All right, everybody, thank you again and enjoy the rest of your Saturday.
Thank you all so much. Yes, I hope to see lots of you on the Monday Zoom. I appreciate you for coming today and for all that you have done as an OKMRC volunteer. Enjoy your weekend.
Bye.
Bye.